Call the period after the Civil War Reconstruction, and of course what we're referring to here is reconstructing the Union, putting it back together. It is the most bitter and divisive period in American history, and it will leave scars for generations. The South sees the North as being vindictive and looking to punish the South for its rebellion. The North would argue that this was the only way to stop the South from going back to its old ways. And it's widely misunderstood. Southerners will claim for generations that it's a time of African Americans being put in charge of ruling the whites. Northerners will come to think of it as kind of a utopian period before the South backslid into its old ways. Neither one of these are true. And it did revolutionize the South, which gives us the other part of the title here. And it will create a new South. The whole thing has lots of problems. Lincoln had insisted that the South had not left the Union, that this was basically just criminals in rebellion against the government. Well, if this was true, if the South had never left the Union, then why did they have to be readmitted? And this is kind of one of the great logical conundrums of Reconstruction. Lincoln refused to negotiate a treaty at the end of a war like you normally would do, because by negotiating a treaty, you would acknowledge that the Confederate States was a real country. But then at the same time, he and the radical Republicans in Congress insisted that the South had to do things to be readmitted to the Union. So again, this logical paradox. They had never left, but they have to be let back in. The South is physically and economically completely destroyed. Towns and plantations have been burned to the ground. You think of Atlanta and Sherman's March to the Sea. Fields have not been planted in years, and they've gone to seed. Bridges and railroads have been destroyed. The Capitol itself is completely demolished. And capital in terms of money is gone as well. Remember, Southerners' wealth was in their slaves, and the slaves have been freed. And so the primary source of wealth was overnight disappeared. Confederates were using Confederate money, and that had absolutely no value now. 285 Southerners were killed. Many more than that were wounded. Starvation and homelessness was rampant. 3.5 million freed slaves are also wandering around the South with nothing to do and nowhere to go. They are literally just wandering around the countryside because what are they supposed to do now that they've been freed? Let's talk about freedom. Some say that freedom simply means ending slavery. Others say there must be land reform so the former slaves, can have some way to support themselves. They demand that the land, or at least some of it, be taken away from the white masters and given to the freed blacks. Others argue it simply means that all races have to be viewed equally under the law. So nobody's really sure. I mean, it's one thing to say we're going to end slavery and free the African Americans. It's an entirely different thing to put that into policy. Blacks naturally segregate themselves. They go off on their own. As a general rule, they do not want to be around the whites. They go and they create their own towns. They stop going to the white churches they've been going to for generations, of course against their will. They create their own clubs, societies. Some even establish schools. Whites argue that freedom means the North must leave, because freedom has become the watchword. People love to use the word freedom, but people don't like to think about what it means. Whites argue that if the North is so concerned with freedom, they need to get out of the South. They need to let the South be free to rule itself. They argue that freedom means local control, which of course would mean a return to white supremacy and preserving the old order. The U.S. occupies the South, or the Union, I should say, occupies the South in order to protect blacks. The South will be filled with Union troops. If you are a Southerner walking around the streets of Charleston or San Antonio, Texas or somewhere, you're going to see Union soldiers, these guys who you just got done fighting, who killed people you know, all over the place, trying to maintain order and protect the freed slaves. In March of 1869, Congress will create the Freedmen's Bureau. This will feed millions of freed slaves and begin to establish schools that will be staffed by Northerners. Some will settle blacks on their own land, but this is very, very a small number of people. It's only chartered for 1 year, and it's way too small to make any significant change. It's simply a stopgap measure. It is bigger in our imagination than it was in real life.